Your mind is not what you think it is. It is not a weapon. It is not a cage. It is not your identity. It is a mirror. And most people are walking through life staring into it with mud still on the glass, wondering why everything looks distorted. You see your world not as it is, but as you are. Every fear, every wound, every unprocessed memory, every opinion you never question, it all becomes residue on the mirror. And the more residue there is, the more corrupted the reflection. You think they betrayed you. You think no one sees your worth. You think life is cruel. But what if that's not truth? What if that's just smudged glass? The mind reflects what it holds. If you carry rage, the world looks like an enemy. If you carry abandonment, everyone feels like a threat. If you carry shame, even love feels suspicious. It's not reality lying to you. It's your mirror, and it hasn't been cleaned in years. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's the mirror. Life shows you you, not to punish, not to shame, but to wake you up, to say, look here, this crack in the glass, it's not permanent, but you must be willing to see it before you can clear it. But most won't look. They'll blame the mirror. They'll smash the reflection and call it justice. They'll burn the world around them because they're too afraid to face the world within them. This is the root of projection. When the truth inside you becomes too unbearable to own, you cast it outward. You demonize what reflects back your own disowned self. And every time you do it, the mirror fogs even more. But here's the thing about mirrors. They don't lie. They just show. It's you who refuses to see. Psyphoria is what happens when the mind is too clouded to trust. When you mistake your coping mechanisms for character, when you confuse your trauma for truth, you don't see the world, you hallucinate it through your triggers, through your assumptions, through the patterns you never dared question. And then you call it fate. You call it bad luck. You call it, this always happens to me. But that's not life repeating itself. That's you repeating yourself inside life. A dirty mirror leads to dirty choices. And dirty choices lead to a life that doesn't feel like yours. So you numb, you chase, you accumulate things to feel valuable. You fill the silence with noise, the pain with distractions. Because if you sat still long enough, you'd hear the voice whisper, this isn't who you are. This isn't where you belong. You've forgotten your reflection. The truth is brutal. You can't love yourself if you've never seen yourself clearly. You can't fix a wound you've mistaken for your personality. You can't find clarity while protecting your delusions. Mental power begins where denial ends. It begins at the moment you stop asking the mirror to flatter you and start asking it to free you. You are not your thoughts, but you are responsible for what you do with them. You are not your pain, but you are responsible for cleaning the glass it left behind. You are not your past, but your past is still the dust on your reflection until you wipe it clean. A clear mirror doesn't flatter. It liberates. It doesn't tell you who to be. It shows you who you've always been underneath the noise. So wipe away the guilt, the bitterness, the jealousy, the victimhood you were rewarded for. And look again. Who is underneath the fog? Who is behind the judgment? Who were you before they told you what was possible for someone like you? Because that essence right there, that is the unfiltered you. Not the version shaped by rejection. Not the version armored by perfectionism. Not the version trained to perform for approval, but the one who remembers. The one who was born clean, clear, curious, wild. And that version isn't gone. It's buried beneath years of emotional mud. beneath fear that froze into identity, beneath narratives that never belonged to you. The good news? Mirrors don't die. They just wait. And when you finally clear it, when you finally have the courage to wipe away what no longer serves, you don't just see yourself, you return to yourself. But don't expect everyone to celebrate. Because when you start to clean your mirror, you become a threat to those still living in the fog. You reflect things they're not ready to face, and they'll blame you for their distortion. Let them. You're not here to dim your clarity to make others comfortable in their confusion. You're here to illuminate, to reflect truth, to be the reminder that they can clean their own mirror too. But that's their choice, not your burden. Mindset is maintenance. The mirror doesn't stay clean on its own. The world will throw its dust on you. Shame will sneak back in. Fear will fog the edges. But now you know. Now you see. Now you have the cloth in your hands. And that makes you powerful. So keep cleaning. Keep seeing. Keep becoming. Because clarity isn't a luxury. It's a requirement. And those who stay blind, they don't lack vision. They just never clean the glass. Clarity is not a reward. It's a reckoning. It doesn't arrive gently. It arrives like a storm ripping the mask from your face and the comfort from your hands. Clarity shows you what you didn't want to see, but needed to. It doesn't flatter your ego. It confronts it. It doesn't protect your excuses. It burns them down. Because once the mirror is clean, you can't pretend anymore. You can't pretend that they love you when they manipulate you. You can't pretend that you're fine when you're crumbling. You can't pretend that staying small is humble when it's really fear in disguise. Clarity is the enemy of comfort and the beginning of power. You can't evolve in the dark. You can't change what you won't admit. And most people don't lack ability, they lack honesty. Honesty with themselves. About what's no longer working. About who they've become in the name of survival. About the weight they carry just to feel accepted. But clarity makes you dangerous. Because once you see clearly, you can choose deliberately. No more drifting. No more begging. No more waiting for external validation to tell you it's time. Now, you decide. You decide who stays. You decide what habits die. You decide what identity you stop defending because it's not yours anymore. Clarity gives you the map, but it also gives you the burden of direction. You're not lost. You're just afraid to walk the path that your truth revealed. But do it anyway, because on the other side of that path is a self you've never met, and they've been waiting for you. Belief. Belief is the architect of your entire life. It's the voice behind every decision, the unseen force behind every boundary you set or fail to. Belief writes your story before you even take a step. And here's the truth. You don't believe what's true. You believe what you've practiced. Belief is repetition, not reality. If you were told you were unworthy over and over, your belief system adopted it as scripture. If you saw love withheld as punishment, your belief system associated vulnerability with danger. If you failed once and heard laughter instead of support, your belief system wrapped success in the fear of ridicule. But what was installed can be uninstalled. And what was repeated can be rewired. You're not broken. You're conditioned. You're not incapable. You're just carrying beliefs that were never questioned, only obeyed. So question them now. Where did this belief come from? Who gave it to me? Was it built from fear or from truth? And do I want to keep it, or is it keeping me? A powerful mind doesn't just consume beliefs. It curates them. It selects only what serves expansion, not comfort. It holds beliefs up to the light like a diamond and inspects every angle before accepting it. Because beliefs don't just live in your head, they become your life. You become what you believe is possible. You become what you believe you deserve. You become what you believe you're allowed to claim. Change your beliefs, and you change your reflection. Purpose. Purpose is not found. It's forged. Forged in failure. Forged in silence. Forged in the fire of everything that didn't work. Purpose is not a passion project. It's not a perfect plan. It's a pull, a gravitational force that won't leave you alone. It's what keeps whispering your name when you're trying to settle. It's what lights your chest on fire when you see injustice, dishonesty, or disconnection. Purpose is personal, but it's never selfish, because real purpose always finds a way to serve, not to please, not to impress, but to elevate, to lift others by lifting the truth. And most people miss it not because they lack calling, but because they keep asking, what do I want to do? Instead of asking, what won't let me sleep if I don't? Purpose doesn't beg for ease. It requires sacrifice. It asks you to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop living in neutral just to avoid offending the status quo. Because you don't stumble into purpose. You bleed into it. You fall face first into it. When your false life finally crumbles and something sacred begins to rise from the ashes. It's not about doing something impressive. It's about becoming someone undeniable. And once you feel it, once it grabs you from the inside, you can't go back to living like you're optional. Resilience. Resilience is not how loudly you roar. It's how quietly you rebuild. It's what happens when the applause stops, when the betrayal hits, when the dream dies, and you keep moving anyway. It's in the moment you hear no and decide that it doesn't define your worth. It's in the day your world collapses and you find a way to breathe through the rubble. Resilience is not reaction. It's response. It's not just bouncing back. It's bouncing forward. Stronger, sharper, wiser. It's the ability to carry pain without letting it harden you. To hold grief without letting it steal your gratitude. To remember what broke you without letting it become you. Most people aren't weak, they're tired. But resilience doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. It says, yes, this hurts, but I'm still here. It says, yes, I'm afraid, but fear won't speak for me. And that decision to stay standing in a world that profits from your collapse is the most radical rebellion there is. Discipline is love wearing armor, not love for others, love for the future you. It's every no to comfort that becomes a yes to power. It's every early morning, every unfinished craving, every ignored temptation that becomes the scaffolding of your sovereignty. Discipline isn't sexy. It's sacred. It's not loud. It's loyal. It doesn't promise instant reward. It delivers eternal alignment. You can't negotiate with a version of you who wants ease. You train that version. You lead it. You say, I know you want to quit, but we don't live like that anymore. Discipline is how you remind the mirror. I respect myself enough to keep building, even when no one's clapping. And that kind of self-respect, it's unshakable. Identity, you are not who they said you were. You are not the version of yourself that learned to survive silence or rejection, or the sting of being misunderstood. You are not the echo of their opinions, nor the shadow of their limitations. Your identity isn't fixed, it's forged. And if you don't forge it consciously, the world will do it for you. They'll hand you labels: broken, angry, quiet, too much, not enough. And if you wear them long enough, you will start to confuse the costume with your character. But hear this clearly. Who you are is not defined by what happened to you. Who you are is what you decide to build in response to it. If your past was chaotic, make your identity peace. If your childhood was unstable, make your identity structure. If your relationships have been toxic, make your identity truth. Identity is not history. It's intention. It's not a set of scars. It's the architecture you design from them. It's the moment you stop saying, this is just how I am, and start asking, who am I when I am no longer reacting? Because that's where your true self waits. Not in the rage, not in the numbness, not in the act you perform for survival, but in the still grounded, knowing that you get to choose again, and you must choose again. Because every time you repeat a pattern out of habit, instead of alignment, you betray the self you could be. Your mirror is clean now, so look into it and name yourself not by your pain, but by your potential. Adaptability. There's only one constant in life, and that is change. Everything else is negotiable. Your power is not in your ability to control the external, it's in your ability to evolve within it. Adaptability is the intelligence of the resilient, the grace of the strategic, the art of letting go before the world forces your hand. You've been taught that consistency means doing the same thing forever. But real consistency, it's loyalty to growth, not to comfort. It's the ability to shed a skin that once served you without mourning it as your identity. Because what helped you survive at one point might be the very thing suffocating your next evolution. And if you're too stubborn to adapt, you'll mistake stagnation for strength. Adaptability doesn't mean you're flaky. It means you listen. It means you sense when the old system is decaying. It means you pivot without panic. Because your stability was never built on sameness. It was built on self-trust. The world changes. People change. Pain comes and pain goes. But you adapt without losing your essence. You bend without breaking. You move without losing direction. You rise without forgetting what anchored you. Mastery. Mastery is not dominance over others. It is discipline over self. It's what happens when wisdom and experience finally stop fighting each other and begin to integrate. Mastery is the calm in your voice when chaos surrounds you. The silence between your words that speaks louder than noise. The strength to walk away when your ego wants to win. Mastery is not about proving, it's about embodying. You don't need to explain your values, they walk into every room with you. You don't need to defend your path, your results whisper louder than arguments ever could. Most people want influence. Few want the inner architecture that creates it. Mastery is built in repetition. In the mundane, in the decisions no one celebrates. In the silence where no praise echoes. In the way you train your mind to keep showing up long after the feeling is gone. It's how you move when you're not being watched. How you carry yourself when no one is clapping. How you stay aligned when no one agrees. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing what matters and living like nothing else does. Mastery is freedom. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Climax. This is where everything changes. Not in the world, in you. You see now, your mirror is clear. You remember what was buried. You recognize what was false. You reclaim what was always yours. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to someone true, stronger, sharper, sovereign. You don't belong in the fog. You don't belong in borrowed beliefs. You don't belong in the cycle of performance and punishment. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be lit on fire, on purpose, on mission. The world will try to dim you, but now you have clarity. Now you have conviction. Now you have a mind that reflects truth, not trauma. You've cleaned the mirror. You've shattered the illusion. You've stepped into the power that was waiting beneath the dust of doubt. So walk like it. Speak like it. Move like someone who has nothing to prove, only something to build. Your mind is a mirror. Clean it or stay blind. But now you've seen. Now you know. And once you know, there's no going back. The scariest parts of you are not your failures, not your wounds, not your fears. The scariest parts of you are the ones you pretend don't exist. The anger you hide behind politeness, the envy you mask with compliments, the self-hatred buried under 1,000 achievements. And the more you avoid them, the louder they become. The more you suppress them, the more they shape your life from the shadows. This is not poetry. This is psychological law. What you do not face will run you. What you exile will lead. What you repress will possess. You are not being haunted by the past. You are being controlled by the parts of yourself you refuse to love. And you call it fate. You call it bad luck. You call it just how I am. No, that voice in your head that sabotages every opportunity, that's your shadow. That panic that arises every time love gets too close, that's your shadow. That explosion when someone disrespects you, not because they're wrong, but because they touched the wound you never healed, that's your shadow. And until you turn around, until you look it in the eyes, it will rule you. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And he was right, because true growth isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. You think you need more positivity, but what you really need is more honesty. Honesty about the resentment you carry. Honesty about the roles you play. Honesty about the person you've been pretending to be to keep people comfortable. Because the shadow is built not from evil, but from avoidance. Every time you said yes when your soul screamed no, shadow. Every time you smiled while being disrespected, shadow. Every time you broke your own heart to protect someone else's comfort, you handed a piece of your power to the darkness. But this isn't about shame. This is about freedom. Because there's nothing more powerful than a person who has walked through their own fire and lived. A person who has sat in the rubble of their own lies and decided to rebuild in truth. That's where psyphoria begins. That state of psychological euphoria that only comes when you stop fearing your own depth and start mining it for wisdom. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are simply filled with rooms you've never dared enter. And now you've found the key. This is where your mindset must evolve. Not into optimism, but into courage. The courage to say, I will no longer pretend. I will no longer perform. I will no longer protect the parts of me that poison me. A strong mindset isn't just positive. It's penetrating. It questions everything. It challenges your reflexes. It doesn't flinch when the ego starts to scream, because the ego will scream. The moment you try to evolve, it will throw every story at you You're fine as you are. This is too hard. Don't go digging where it hurts. But healing requires excavation. And excavation requires discomfort. The strong mind doesn't avoid discomfort. It walks straight into it with open eyes and a steady heart, because it knows the only way out is through. And walking through the fire requires a new belief system, one that doesn't treat discomfort as danger, one that doesn't treat pain as punishment, one that doesn't treat your past as a prison. You must believe that truth will not destroy you. It will reveal you. You must believe that everything you buried is not evil, but injured. The child in you who never got to speak, the teenager in you who was punished for expressing rage, the adult in you who performs success while suffocating in silence, they are not your enemies. They are pieces of you calling to be integrated. And you cannot transcend what you won't acknowledge. You cannot master what you refuse to meet. You must believe that what's inside you is not too much, not too dark, not too broken. It's just unloved. And when you finally choose to see it, to speak to it, to hold it without judgment, you stop being a slave to the shadow. You become its witness. And the moment you witness your shadow, you begin to reclaim your power. From that witnessing comes clarity. Clarity that isn't pleasant at first. It hurts. It stings. It reveals the masks you thought were your face. It shows you where you were living a life based on survival, not authenticity. You see the relationships that were built on trauma bonding. You see the goals that were built on ego inflation. You see the behaviors that were never yours, just inherited adaptations, and you grieve. You grieve the time you lost. You grieve the peace you postponed. You grieve the identity that wasn't built by you, but for you. But clarity gives you back your sight. And once you see clearly, you can choose intentionally, not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of sovereignty. That's when life begins to reshape. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And with that reshaping comes vision. But this time, it's not fantasy. It's not a projection of your insecurity. It's a vision born of wholeness. A vision anchored in reality, not reaction. A vision that doesn't beg to be seen, but commands silence when it speaks. Because now, you're no longer building a life to outrun your shadow. You're building a life with it. You bring your wounds to the table. You bring your darkness into the light. And you stop hiding from the parts of you that were born for depth. Your vision becomes expansive, not because you've escaped your pain, but because you've transformed it into purpose. This isn't the life they told you to build. This is the life only you could build. A life rooted in truth. A life free from pretending. A life strong enough to carry the entire you, not just the polished version. And that kind of vision terrifies people still addicted to illusion. But that's not your concern anymore. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be real. Good. Because when vision becomes real, when it's no longer about escape, but embodiment, you finally arrive at what most people spend their lives avoiding. Purpose, not the purpose they package for you, not the one found in resumes, roles, or titles, but the soul contract kind, the kind that emerges only after the masks fall, after the lies burn, after the shadow is invited in and offered a seat at your table instead of a lock and key. This purpose doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, a persistent pull, a sacred ache, a knowing that says, this is the work only you can do, because only you've walked the path required to carry it. Your shadow wasn't a curse, it was your initiation. Everything you thought disqualified you, your grief, your shame, your rage, your fear, that was the tuition for your awakening. Now, purpose no longer sounds like ambition. It sounds like alignment. It sounds like integrity. It sounds like silence that no longer seeks applause to feel real. You are not chasing purpose now. You're becoming it. Every word you speak, every boundary you enforce, every time you show up in truth, without performance, without armor. Purpose is not what you do. It's how you carry who you are when no one's watching. And to carry purpose through the chaos of the world, you need something far deeper than motivation. You need discipline, the ancient kind, the kind rooted in reverence, not punishment. Discipline that says, this version of me cannot walk where I'm going, so I will become someone new again and again until my soul is fully expressed in this lifetime. Discipline is holy. It's how you protect your purpose from distractions that dress up as opportunities. It's how you move, even when your mind says rest, not out of burnout, but out of devotion. This is the devotion of warriors, of mystics, of revolutionaries, because to live awake in a sleeping world is to be under constant pressure to fall back into who you were. Discipline is the inner vow that says, I refuse. I refuse to betray myself for comfort. I refuse to return to numbness. I refuse to perform for love that should be free. I refuse to explain truth to those addicted to illusion. Discipline doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to return again and again to your breath, to your body, to your center, to your truth, especially when the world is screaming otherwise. From that center, you act, not impulsively, not reactively, but with sacred action. Because once you've faced your shadow, your actions become surgical, precise, potent. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer move to be seen. You act because your existence has weight now. Your time is sacred. Your energy is currency. Your presence is a portal. You move with clarity. You speak with direction. You rest with purpose. Action is no longer about control. It's about creation. And the life you're building now was never meant to look like anyone else's. It's been carved from your depths. It's been forged in the quiet of your healing. It's been lit by the torch of everything you once buried. You don't owe anyone a roadmap. You don't need their confirmation. Your action is your confirmation, and it moves worlds. But even the most grounded action is nothing if it isn't infused with emotional mastery. This is where the weak collapse, where the immature react, where the world keeps you chasing feelings instead of forging freedom. But not you, not anymore, because you understand now, feelings are not facts, and pain is not prophecy. Yes, feel. Yes, allow. Yes, honor. But do not bow. Do not build altars to passing weather. Do not assign identity to transient emotions. You are allowed to feel rage and not destroy. You are allowed to feel grief and still lead. You are allowed to feel lost and still trust your feet. Emotional mastery is not control. It is coherence. It's the ability to feel everything fully without letting anything override who you are. This is what makes you terrifying to people who haven't met their own soul. Because your peace can't be shaken. Because your clarity isn't rented. Because your love doesn't flinch in the presence of discomfort. That is strength. That is sovereignty. That is real power. And when the emotions settle, when the chaos clears, you enter the most sacred phase of all, integration. The moment you stop trying to fix yourself and start trying to remember yourself, you bring all the pieces back. The wild, the wounded, the brilliant, the broken, the one who wanted to run, the one who stayed, the one who tried and failed and tried again. You stop amputating your past. You stop editing your truth. You stop censoring your passion. You gather it all. And for the first time, you stand whole. Not healed like a Hollywood ending. Not perfect, like a self-help cliche. But honest, present, untamed, alive. And that's when the shadow no longer controls you. Because you're no longer ashamed of it. You've given it a name. You've given it a voice. You've given it love. And in return, it gives you your power back. Good. Because once you've integrated the shadow, once you've stopped fighting yourself and started walking with yourself, you don't just change. You become unshakable. This is resilience not as the world defines it, but as your soul embodies it. Resilience is not being untouched by life. It's being transformed by it without being owned by it. It's crying without collapsing. It's bleeding without blaming. It's standing in the storm and saying, I've already been to hell, and I came back with light. Resilience is when betrayal no longer turns to bitterness, when failure no longer becomes identity, when pain becomes information, not identity. You've become immune to destruction because you no longer resist your own becoming. They can take everything from you: title, praise, money, applause, but they can't take what you've built in the dark. They can't take the strength forged in silence. They can't take the self you've met in the fire, because that self, that through you, is no longer a theory. It's no longer a possibility. It's a ground beneath your feet. And now that you've stood in the fire, you start to seek something deeper. Not more answers, not more validation, but learning. The kind that doesn't come from books. The kind that doesn't fit neatly into quotes. The kind that comes from watching yourself through every breakdown and asking, what is this here to teach me? You don't ask, why is this happening to me? You ask, what is this sculpting me into? You become a student of your own evolution. You study your silence. You study your rage. You study your triggers because they are not weaknesses. They are windows. Each one points to a place within you that still longs to be seen, to be understood, to be set free. And you give yourself the one thing no one else could ever offer: awareness without punishment. That is sacred learning. It's what separates those who repeat patterns from those who rewrite bloodlines. You are not here to pass on pain. You are here to break the cycle with presence. And to do that, you must become water. You must become adaptable. You must unhook yourself from the illusion of control, from the fantasy that safety lies in certainty. There is no map for a soul like yours. There are only instincts, only moments, only inner truths that guide your next breath. Adaptability is the weapon of the awakened. It is how you bend without breaking, how you shift without losing center, how you move through endings without mistaking them for failure. You don't cling. You adjust. You don't demand the world to make room. You become the room. And in doing so, you terrify those still clinging to the static. Because you've proven you don't need predictability to feel peace. You've proven you can be whole even as the world rearranges itself around you. That kind of soul, that kind of mind, that kind of heart is one that lives in gratitude, but not the shallow kind, not thank you for this latte kind, not toxic gratitude that tells you to ignore pain. This is sacred gratitude, the kind that looks at the hardest parts of your life and says, thank you for the breaking. Thank you for the abandonment. It brought me back to me. Thank you for the pain. It carved space for purpose. Thank you for the silence. It taught me to listen inward. This gratitude doesn't bypass the dark. It blesses it. It doesn't paint over the past. It reclaims it. It doesn't say, that shouldn't have happened. It says, it shaped me into someone I'd die to protect now. That's what gratitude does when it's real. It turns suffering into soil. It turns endings into initiations. It turns a life you hated into a life that built you. And for that you bow, not to the pain, but to the you who made it through. And now, here you are. Not who you were. Not who they wanted. Not who you pretended to be to survive. You are something else entirely. You are the child of chaos and clarity. The fusion of fire and stillness. The paradox they can't define because you don't need to be defined anymore. You faced your shadow. You've seen what it can do when left unseen, and what it becomes when loved. You've turned pain into power, silence into strength, wounds into wisdom, and now you are free. Not because the world changed, but because you no longer needed to. You are free because you remembered who you are and chose that self over safety. Again and again and again, you are no longer at war with yourself. And that is the most terrifying kind of peace, because nothing owns you now. Not shame, not guilt, not expectation, not fear. You walk clean. You walk whole. You walk with the shadow behind you, not dragging you, but moving with you, integrated, respected, balanced. And anyone who looks in your eyes now knows they are not just seeing a person. They are witnessing a soul that has come home. And no illusion can survive in the presence of someone who has made peace with all that they are. Your shadow will control you until you face it. Know that you have nothing can control you again, ever.